Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. We got a packed house tonight. This is Cody. I'm here with Brett, Justin, and Blue making his return to the podcast tonight. Oh, very exciting stuff here. We're talking about Skeleton Crew on Disney Plus tonight. Just finished up this past week. This episode will drop on Martin Luther King Day on Monday here. So hope everybody does something to remember what that was all about and why he was important in history. So let's find out what our hosts have been up to since we talked to them last. I guess we'll start with our normal frequent host first and give Blue a chance to think about what he's done for the last 6 months while we go with Brett and Justin first. So, Brett, what you been up to?
Well, this week's Adventures of a Spider Gary was canceled because literally nothing happened.
Oh,
He seems to be continuing in his hibernation state. But what we've been doing, we've still been watching a few different shows, including Beast Games, which has one episode or two episodes left. I'm not actually sure, but that's been enjoyable so far. We have binged all the way through 3 seasons of What We Do in the Shadows already, and enjoying that quite a bit. And I haven't watched the entirety of it yet, but I watched about half of the the new mockumentary Kunk on Life, starring Philomena Kunk. And
what?
I through half of it, I have been laughing my ass off frequently. So when I get back to watching the rest of that, I'll let you know if it continued to be hilarious for me. My wife finds it to be not hilarious, and I find that to be hilarious as well.
Everything will get funnier tomorrow.
Well, we'll see. Well, that's me.
Is
Yeah,
that
okay.
because it's Martin Luther King Day? How dare you?
Yes, that's
Everyone
what I
knows he had a
meant.
great sense of humor.
Yes, that's exactly what I meant. Justin, what have you been up to?
As we're recording this, it is currently -5 degrees Fahrenheit where I am. So I've been hunting tauntauns and crawling inside them for warmth. Um,
Way to put off
but
our European listeners on the outset here, boy.
I
Ugh.
specified Fahrenheit.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Sorry, Latvia. Um, but no. Recently tried out a board game I got for Christmas, Wormspan. That's worm with a Y, like dragon. And I guess it is comparable to the game that preceded it, Wingspan, which I haven't played. But this one focuses on dragons, and really enjoyed it. It's the initial setup, and learning what's what takes a little time, but yeah, once you get into it, it feels really smooth. Like things flow, in a good way. I can even after that first round that we played, I could certainly see different strategies and different ways to approach it. Very solid game. Um, and speaking of games, I recently played with a friend, not all of it, but a good chunk of a game that I honestly think should have been my 2024 game of the year, considering it came out in 2024 versus Tormented Souls, which didn't. So I'm retroactively changing my award for that from the Fondies, from Tormented Souls
Whoa,
to a
whoa,
game.
whoa. That's got to go through a committee. There are steps.
Well, submitted for the approval of the committee,
All
a game
right.
called
We've already made
My
the
Side.
plaque for it.
Sorry, Tormented Souls. But a game called My Side, Miside, where it is a game by a small studio. I don't know exactly how many people, but a horror game that doesn't feel like a horror game at first. Um, it starts off, you're just a guy who downloads a game on his cell phone, which is like a little, RPG maker looking thing where you have a little virtual person, a little virtual girlfriend, for lack of a better term, that you do stuff for. And, it's like, oh, I need a new TV. So, play these games and earn money for this. And so the first 30 minutes or so, it's just like stupid little things like that.
Justin, this is an ad on your phone. That's all that was.
Well, it's like I said, first 20 minutes, maybe 30, if you're slow, is that. And then she's like, I've got a surprise for you. Close your eyes. So your character closes his eyes, open your eyes, and suddenly you're inside your phone. And like the
This
little
is about to be open your mouth.
and the little 2D world is now fully 3D. And the the character you've been interacting with, whose name is Mita, is also fully 3D, and she really, really, really doesn't want you to leave the phone. And things get really weird and really dark really quick. And there are some surprisingly inventive like gameplay choices. Like it doesn't just stay in first person horror or anything. Um, that's a lot of it, but at any given point, you might find yourself in like a racing game or in like a visual novel or like any number of odd choices, but they all work and fit seamlessly uh, uh, into the overall setting. And there's, as you're going through it, you're trying to find like the original version of the game, which has other versions of Mita in it, and each one is different. Some are evil, some are just really sad, some are very glitchy, and it's a very strange approach to horror, but it is so freaking good. Um, it's only on PC right now, I think, but if any of that sounded at all interesting, or you just like outside the box horror, give My Side a chance. It is a fantastic game, which it has done some things I don't think I've ever seen in a horror game before. So definitely check it out.
Interesting. It's quite a twist for the game there. You're marching towards DC and you assume it's for civil rights, and then all of a sudden you get there and you realize it's January 6th. Anyway, Blue, what you been up to, buddy?
Well, let's see. Uh, Building a lot of Lego. I think would start there. My kiddo got a couple of Harry Potter sets, the Hogwarts Express little train.
Trans,
Uh,
did you say? Train, sorry, go on.
Trains, yes,
Yes,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. We've been into trains lately, and we got a little Lionel set from a couple of
Oh,
mutual friends of ours. It's from like the 50s and 60s, maybe 70s. So putting that together, seeing if it shoots sparks, it did
yeah.
not. It throws off a little ozone, which is like maybe this got to be somebody's nostalgia smell when they like, oh, fire up the train just see what the smell like. Brings me back. So did that a little bit. Side note, I'm kind of insulted that Henry finally got on the wingspan train, even though it took dragons to get him in. So I mean, I'm not really surprised. Um,
I
Played
like
a
what I
little bit
like.
of Everdell, but I think mainly I've been playing some Marvel Rivals here and there. I've liked the squad shooters. Been playing with a couple friends from NMU recently on that, maybe a couple nights a week, and my cousin-in-law, and just goofing off in there because it's fun, being on Discord and talking shit and goofing around. Can I say that word? Sorry, I forget if we are PG or
You
PG
can say
13.
fuck, it's okay.
Oh, okay, okay. Whoa,
Yeah,
whoa,
yeah.
escalating it. So yeah, that's
You,
kind of it. And then looking for a job. I've been was working part-time in the library up until about 2 weeks ago. Put my 2 week notice in because I got a seventh grade social studies job for a remote academy here in Michigan. So I'll be doing that here starting on the 27th. So pretty stoked about that. And
nice.
yeah, other than that, just kind of hopping on my road bike is on a indoor trainer, so been watching a couple What If episodes every morning when I hop on the bike to try to see if I can get through that series. Then find out that there's 3 seasons. So I'm through season one. And that's the long and short of it.
That's all right. You'll be in good shape by the time you're done.
Yeah.
My end, two things I guess I'll just say, and neither one is new, but my wife and I have been binging for us at least, with almost an episode a day on average. So that's binging for us of the second episode of The Mole on Netflix, which I briefly mentioned to Brett the other day. We're down to the finale, and that's where we got to before the football game started yesterday. So we just got to see who the mole is in this last episode, and that's going to be a pretty exciting reveal on that. And then I will continue to say that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has taken over our house. My wife is not playing it, but both of my kids are, and I am as well. Two Switches going almost all the time playing this, and I really thought one of them would burn out a little bit after like 3 weeks of this, but my daughter has incorporated normal elements back into her life, and my son is still going like hardcore as many hours a day as he can into it. So it's been a ton of fun though. Just the stuff you can find and the variety of the world out there is just so fun to explore. Um, yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing in my spare time as well. So anyway, all
Have they
right, well,
built
what?
Gundams? Like as
No.
far as engineering goes, like do they get rabbit down the rabbit hole of trying to build elegant
Mm,
structures or
I don't think so. I wouldn't doubt Boston probably will get there at some point, but right now he's trying to like
Hmm.
speed. He uses, they both, well, he in particularly uses online guides to find like the strongest weapon, where to find this thing at. And then he tells me these things like, did you know this? And I'm like, don't spoil my game. Because I'm
Hmm.
way behind plot wise where he's at, but he's running around with these weapons that are like, look, I found this combo. It's like a wet sword, and if you get it wet and then you fuse this thing to it and then you do this, it's like 178 attack. And I'm like, what? I'm over here with my like level 6 piece of wood, and I'm like, go.
It's on fire.
Yeah. So it's good. He might get there at some point. I don't know, but there's some fun, crazy stuff you can build in it for sure. But it is not, I will say, because this was a Joe concern, it is not as construction dependent as you would have thought from like the trailer and stuff. So there's minimal, but you can basically mitigate things, make them easier if you build a little bit here and there. So there we go. All right. Anyway, we're here to talk about Skeleton Crew, which just ended on Disney Plus this past Wednesday, I think it was, and or Tuesday, Wednesday, I forget, one of the two. So just some intro stuff on this before we get into some analysis today. This is, according to what I could find online, this is already the ninth season of live action Star Wars that they've had on Disney Plus at this point. Quite a few shows have been in there. A couple have had more than one season. This is 8 episodes. If you're interested in checking this one out today, we'll have some spoilers in here as well, but I don't know that it's going to really detract too much from an experience of watching this. Overall, this is doing pretty well. It's got a 91% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes from critics. It's got an 80% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb is a little lower. They have a 7.2, and IGN has it at an 8.0. So, give or take somewhere around the 8 out of 10 area. We'll see what we think about it. Also wanted to just briefly say our cast for this one. We have Jude Law. He's the main star, I guess, if you want to look at like a notable Hollywood name. Plays a character named Jode or Jod. Is it Jod? Is that how you say his name?
God.
Uh, Pirate Captain. He's also a Force user. And then we have a bunch of kids here, which is really interesting about this one. So we have Ravi Cabot Conyers as Wim, who is a human boy from the planet At-Aten. We have Ryan Kiera Armstrong as Fern, a human girl from the planet At-Aten as well. Kiriana Crater is KB, who is a human, but also has some cybernetic enhancements due to some sort of accident, which I don't think is ever fully specified in the show. And then we have two people here playing this last character, Neil. Robert Timothy Smith is the voice of this character. He is an elephant-ish kind of alien, also from At-Aten, and somebody named Casey Barman was the actual kind of in costume person that walked around for this role, if you will. And then last person that's kind of credited as a major role here is good old Nick Frost as the voice of SM-33, who is a droid in this.
Oh,
And Rob Ramsdell is the person who was kind of the, again, boots on the ground type person for this character as well. So,
You forgot
um,
Jaleel White. He was
right.
Steve Urkel.
yes. And Urkel is in this show as well. Not every episode, but enough that family matters. So, um, all right, let's see what else we got. Overview. This is, I don't know what website I got this off, so apologies. Just says Skeleton Crew is a coming of age story about four children who make a discovery on their home planet, get lost in the galaxy, and go on an adventure to get back home. So, last couple of TV shows we reviewed on here, we kind of did do an episode by episode analysis because they were both more anthology style TV shows. Not the case with this, with just kind of the one through line plot with the kids. So, not necessarily going to go through episode by episode on this one tonight, but just kind of some overall impressions in a few different categories. And I'm intrigued to hear what you guys thought of this one, and maybe we can convince some other people to watch this if we thought it was good. So, wanted to start off with just kind of having you guys talk about what your thoughts were on the plot of this show. I mean, we have a couple kids who find a spaceship more or less in the woods and go off on wacky adventure, and then eventually come back home at the end of all this with a lot that happens in between. Um, so when you first saw the show, was like having stars that were kids in this, did this kind of like, were you like, ooh, this is going to be terrible? Or, is this something where, maybe more like Brett, or I don't even know, maybe Blue, where you like, this is something I can watch with my kids? I don't know.
I didn't like from the first announcement that it was going to be essentially all kids as the main characters. Um, like I didn't have a feeling immediately like, oh no, this is a problem. Um, though I do have to admit, like it can certainly be hit or miss with whether those characters are enjoyable to watch or whether they are not. So I will get to that more, but
Yeah.
initial thoughts were I was interested and not turned off by the concept of it.
And Justin, you totally hate kids, so where did you stand on this one?
I mean, anything that involves or heavily focuses on child actors is a very dodgy proposition. Like, as soon as I heard that, I had a lot of trepidation. I mean, there have been great performances by child actors, in things I've enjoyed, like
Like
the
Full
girl.
House.
Well, like the girl who did the voice of Clementine in the Walking Dead Telltale games, she was
Hmm.
fantastic. And then on the flip side, you've got this is pod racing, from little Anakin Skywalker, and it's just I was worried it was going to be more towards that side of things
You leave
than.
Jake Lloyd alone, okay?
Right?
But so yeah, I was definitely hesitant going into this. Whether my expectations were superseded, we'll see. We'll see.
I fall into the category of my kid's 6, and it's a hard sell to be like, yeah, I think let's fire up all 3 seasons of Mandalorian. Like, there's still some pretty heavy violence, and this is where I will channel my inner Bill Burr any time during the night, but Star Wars is this is a hot take, maybe it's not. Star Wars is for children and for people who are coming of age. Like we can still enjoy it as older people, but the audience is like, wow, I can really see myself in these characters. And so I got some like real big ET vibes more so than the Goonies. Like I thought I saw
Oh, yeah.
some Spielberg come out with some of those elements. And I liked I think as we get into the storytelling, I like that the episodes of the plot focus on the kids more so. And I think if you're a younger viewer, seeing those characters, you can see yourself in them. Um, and I think also like when I saw it was PG, my kiddo was like, "Hey, can I watch this?" I was like, "Yes, this is great. We can watch this. This is going to be fun." And I think there will be some pretty cool Star Wars thematic elements. And I think it was a great ride. So I think overall I enjoyed it and I didn't have any reservations about it.
Nice. Yeah. This was one similar to Justin. I get a little leery when I see kids are like the stars of the show. Even like the Acolyte, which came out a while back, the principal actors were older than this by far, but like still younger actors compared to what we traditionally have seen in some of the Star Wars films. And I think they did an okay job in that as well, but the plot was just kind of wankety wonkety as we didn't love that. But this one I think had a pretty outstanding plot, and they did a nice job in this, I thought, of kind of having an interesting plot, also like a decent amount of character development. We could talk about that as we kind of go through this. And they kind of work together, I think, for the benefit of both, where it wasn't like tacked on, like, let's try to make these characters interesting at the expense of the story we're trying to tell, and vice versa here. So, yeah, I thought it was pretty good. What did you guys think of the full incorporation of the pirate elements into the plot? I was kind of curious because I knew the title of the story and I didn't really see them going as hard into like the pirate lore as they did in this one, but
Um, I I also wasn't expecting it, because everything I'd heard about this show heading in was like, oh, it's the Goonies, but in space. and there is that element, but like Blue said, there's also a bit of ET, and I think there's a bit of a heavy emphasis from Pirates of the Caribbean, which I wasn't expecting, and even at like towards the end, a dash of Fallout, which we'll get to that, I'm sure, when we talk about the plot. And it was an unexpected combination, but I kind of liked how they leaned into it. I mean, they were just willing to kind of go full bore into this outlandish scenario, and I think the show was stronger for it. Like it had that element of uh, not magical realism, but just I don't want to say whimsy either, but it had that element of the fantastic that you got from a lot of movies, kids movies from the 80s, like The Goonies, like the Last Starfighter, like yeah, the Flight of the Navigator. It had that element of anything is possible, that feel to it, and it's been a long time since I've seen anything like TV show, movie, whatever, that actually embraced that. So it was unexpected, but in a good way, I think.
I feel like it the Star Wars setting naturally just kind of lends well to like the notion of pirates. Like you always they've
Hmm.
hit it in the other TV shows, especially like maybe was it the second or third season of Mandalorian where you have the Raiders who are more or less like space pirates, but I think to lean much more into the pirate lore, I think Nick Frost does a lot of the heavy lifting, and then even just the visuals of the bot with one eye and then a little like marmot that pops in and out. I think really, really good comedy and good comedic devices, and then just all the riddles and puzzles, and I think maybe there's a couple episodes that were directed by one particular director who did a fantastic job. I forget. I'll have to look at the credits of what episode I'm referencing, but there's some Disney's like Treasure Planet and maybe a couple of like more obscure space discovery type movies, which I think, there's plenty of backlog as to what you could draw from. But I think all in all, did a really good job of, just use an example, like a Jedi. At first there's like a notion that this might be a Jedi relic where naturally those things exist all across the galaxy. And then, that's what takes the kids on their adventure. But then just a lot of just elements that create riddles or puzzles based on programming of a droid or the pirate's code. A lot of those things make for, I don't know, I feel like they blended it really well that it didn't feel trite or overdone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did also enjoy the pirate theming of it quite a bit. It did manage to make it feel like it was like 1700s pirates just in space. Like it had that feel to it without feeling like it was out of place. Um, like they tried to shoehorn something in where it didn't belong. And I think like Han Solo always felt a bit piratey.
Yep.
He's more of a like swashbuckler, but there's always been a little bit of that element in Star Wars. I felt like, um, but I felt like it all fit really well in the way they did it and it was presented. And I just enjoy pirate theming and stuff quite a bit anyway, so it worked really well for me.
Yeah, I was a big fan of everything. You just touched on one thing I was gonna say, Brett, which was like Han and Chewie were like smugglers, like, kind of what we saw as pirates in the Star Wars universe prior to this, but this did feel different. It kind of felt like Guardians of the Galaxy in Pirates of the Caribbean, but the Guardians were little kids. Like it was, but like that level of humor and and they're kind of borrowing from all over, but yet it does kind of feel like E.T. and the Goonies. Those are good comparisons as well, I think, out there. Um, yeah, it's kind of interesting, and I just really liked that it was also like a different style of story in the Star Wars universe as well. Like it didn't feel like anything else from Star Wars, even though technically I guess this is the same time period as like The Mandalorian and stuff post episode, whatever that would be, 4 or 5 or 6. I always lose track how that works, but yes. But anyway. All right. Well, yeah, so let's talk about what did you have any particular like scenes or plot points that you really enjoyed? So I'm not gonna, like I said, go through the whole series here, but essentially these kids take off on their planet and they're kind of like hyper warped out into space to the point where they're like, let's go home. And they're like, well, we don't know how to get home. And thus begins the adventure of trying to figure out where they're from. And every time they tell somebody the name of their planet, it's kind of this mythical pirate lore of a planet that doesn't really exist, except it must exist because that's where they're from. And so hilarity ensues as they pick up Jude Law and other things along the way. So, any particular like parts about the plot that you want to just jump into here that you really enjoyed or perhaps didn't enjoy?
I want to focus on like one scene just to start.
Yeah.
Because I fully admit, like when I was sitting through episode one, initially I was only sort of half really paying attention to it because I didn't know if this was something I'd like. So I was watching it, but also like doing other stuff. And there comes to a point where they get the ship, they wake it up basically, and it starts taking them away from where they've been their entire lives, and they start like they see stars for the first time, and that realization of like what are those? I think they're planets. No, they're stars. I didn't think there'd be so many of them. It's just like all of a sudden it's like record scratch, and it really kind of brought into focus just how remote this place is. And I didn't really, if they had mentioned the barrier much throughout, like the first episode, I didn't quite notice it. But I think it was like once or twice it kind of registered. And then it's like they're past it. And I'm like, just where have they been living? So that was a moment that really, really hooked me because it's like they are really doing something different with this and really, really doing high concept ideas with this little corner of the galaxy. And I appreciate the heck out of that. Like this is kind of the sort of storytelling that Star Wars needed after, after the fall of the Empire. Things that are different, things that are creative, things that really, really took us into different places and
Hmm.
showed things from different perspectives. So that was when I started really thinking this show might be something special. So that one little scene just really did it for me.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point in there, which I was going to mention later. But this is, I think, what we have even said on many episodes on here. Star Wars has just like a lot of these franchises we look at, they have total freedom. They can do whatever they want in any corner of the universe or the galaxy and the galaxy next to it that the whales took them to, whatever it may be. Um, and that there's little nuggets in this series from the other Star Wars movies, but you wouldn't have need to have seen any of those to enjoy this story for what it is. Like, what's in here is explained enough to be what's in here to make sense within the world that we're given, and we don't need to know anything else from any of the other Star Wars properties, which I thought was also very refreshing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, I felt like it was they did a good job of making it reasonably believable that the kids could actually like do what they did. Like they start out just kind of like stumbling their way into things and things happening out on kind of without their what they're not making it happen. It's going to happen around them. But then later on, they actually are like doing this. Like they're flying the ship on their own, basically, and like shooting the guns on their own. And I feel like they handled that in a way that it felt believable enough. They weren't left going, all right, now it doesn't make any. Is that logical? That can that couldn't actually happen. So I think that just with the way that it's structured, especially with the kids, because that's often the thing is kids just don't have the knowledge to do things in the movies that most adults can. So I feel like they handled that pretty well. It didn't detract from the story.
I'd say, I mean, I don't, Cody, repeat your question one more time. Like,
I
just
was just
what?
asking if there were any parts of the plot or any particular scenes or moments that really kind of stood out to you, good or bad.
Yeah, I'd say kind of echoing both Brett and Justin's sentiment. Like, one, the capabilities of kids, right? They're figuring out what it means to work together. Um, the dynamics of being crewmates and forced into the circumstance. Like, that was really cool. I'd say self-contained. Like, there's Jude Law's character and the fact that he's force sensitive. Um, I appreciated the notion of how they explore that a little bit without spoiling it too much. There's always this rumor of, is he a survivor of Order 66 after the prequels? And then, that does get explained. And I feel like it was very satisfactory. Like it was satisfying to hear, okay, like that was pretty neat to how they explored that. And um I'd say like in the swashbuckling, like there's many times where you think Jude Law's character is going to get, just wrecked by either the pirates that are chasing him or the assassins that are like trying to sell him out and bounty hunters. And he just managed to have a silver tongue on getting like out of every situation. Silver, like not in a plot armor kind of way, but just like, okay, yep, it makes sense that he's kind of, smooth talker. Um, and then I'd say the last piece I would share is there's episode 6, is an episode that's directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, and it's great to see that she is more capable than her father in terms of directing a Star Wars, piece. Um, I feel like she's directed a few episodes of The Mandalorian, and those ones have all been pretty
Yeah.
excellent. But I think just the dynamics with the kids really hit like a boiling point at episode 6, and then you look at the credits afterwards, like, okay, yeah, that was the episode that Bryce Dallas Howard directed, and man, is it really, really good at like hitting a
Hmm.
fever pitch before going into the final 2 episodes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
One last thing that came to
Yeah.
mind while they were talking. I really appreciate the restraint that the shows at certain points because there is, I'm not going to spoil too much, but there is a scene in either the last episode or the second to the last one where there's this big struggle going on, where a lot of characters are involved and there's a weapon that's just out of reach. And it's a matter of someone's in danger, like of being killed, and there's all this going on. I was cringing, waiting for the moment when Wim was gonna like just hold out his hand and suddenly be able to use the Force and like pull the weapon to him and
Uh,
be able to do something. They didn't do that, and I applaud the hell out of that because we've seen that sort of crap in other recent Star Wars material, and the fact that they showed restraint and actually tried to keep things more grounded, it was such a breath of fresh air, and it actually made the stakes seem like they mattered rather than just hand waving it away and like, oh, anyone can do this. So yeah, kudos to all the people involved for not taking the easy way out when they easily could have.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think to like just to piggyback off that one last thing, it's like I think the theme of even when the kids show up on like the pirate world, like there's a bit of restraint of what would you do if like children just showed up on a pirate outpost, or the I'd say like thematically, uh Jude Law's character has like this inner turmoil of what should he do with these children that are technically under his care, but he could also be completely heartless about. And I think the show does a really good job, like you said, Henry, of putting some restraint on things.
yeah, I won't go into like plot where I enjoyed, didn't enjoy favorite moments and stuff, but I will say I thought the plot, I mentioned this once already a little bit, but I liked that the plot served a logical way for each of the 4 kids to go through like a growth journey of their individual aspects as well. Like Wim got his adventure and like found out it wasn't everything he wanted it to be, but it was awesome also. And like Fern actually kind of stole the show for me. I'll talk about her in a little bit here, but like she was always kind of like had to be in charge and like putting other people down all the time, and like finally learned like she needs other people around her too, and like what it means to be a friend. And that was all pretty good. And KB had her own little story she went through with like confidence and talking to other people about things. And then Neil's just fun. He's just like the little worried kid who learns a little bit of courage towards the last couple episodes and is doing these things of like, whoa. Um, and then also kind of with your restraint idea you guys both just mentioned as well. Like I also thought it was very refreshing, not to do too many spoilers here, but I actually thought where they end the story with Jod is actually kind of refreshing as well, because I kind of thought he was going to end up doing one thing at the end of this series, and he did not, which I actually kind of enjoyed that he did not. So That was another place where I feel like in a different Star Wars show they would have as well, like been like, and this guy ends up doing this at the end, but they didn't. So pretty good. Yeah.
On that point, not to take all the wind out of the sails, but evidently this is the lowest viewed series that they've made, and so for that point, it seems already unlikely that they're going to make a second season, which is probably why, like, at least the plot elements or like the plot structure is pretty much self-contained.
Hmm.
So, but I think just like from some of the tabloids and reactions, it sounds like there may not be a second season because of, I don't know how they determine. It evidently is a pretty expensive show per episode compared
Sure.
to like Mandalorian, but
Oh, okay.
I'm I hope that there'd be a second season, but I would also be like I'd also be okay if there wasn't.
It did pretty well, like view wise. I know it was like the top show, first two episodes were the top show, and then the second week they were like second or third show, and third week they did something past that. But it's interesting to hear that. Plus, it's got pretty good critical acclaim, from a lot of people in audience as well. But if it ends up being just a one-off, like I think it works as a one-off too. Like it's just a special little thing that existed, and that would be okay also. I wouldn't mind another season, but I don't know where another season would go too. So there's that question also,
I'm a
you
little
know.
Maybe
bit.
this is how Thrawn got all the money to put together big old
Yeah.
how the maybe this is how the First Order gets all its money back.
Could be.
Uh, yeah, that doesn't make it's a little surprising that you're saying it's so has such low view count. But uh, then again, there could very well be a lot of people, like adults, looking at this like, well, I don't want to watch kids. So you probably have like a fairly large segment of the Disney, audience that just didn't want to try and give it a shot.
Yeah, I will say, based on that, if I hadn't been reviewing it for this podcast, I might not have watched it just because of that reason. Because it didn't seem like I would be the target audience, and why watch something that I'm not likely to enjoy, etc. So, but that said, I'm glad we're talking about it because I might not have ever seen it otherwise.
I'm gonna just jump ahead here. It's the point I was going to raise right towards the end, but since we're kind of right there right now, I took this quote off IGN, and Joe would probably not love this one if he was here with us, but IGN had a line in their review for the series where they said Skeleton Crew might be more important to the future of Star Wars than Andor was. And I guess they mean that from like Blue said, the onset here, like Star Wars is supposed to be like this fantastical journey for kids to get involved with and then fall in love with the franchise and then stick with it. And like it sounds like at least the three of us with kids had our kids watch the show, and my kids enjoyed it. They're 13 and 10. Oops, not yet. 13 and 10. Almost to that age, but not quite. And they enjoyed it, and sounds like other kids did as well. So maybe it's like, I don't know, maybe adults are hesitant to show Star Wars, but they need to find this one and show it to their kids. And I guess they're
Yeah,
saying there like it's more important that future generations get involved with the franchise as opposed to like darker corners for the adults to continue to find joy in it. I don't know.
I could see that being true. Yeah, this is the first. I believe I have to think back quickly. I think this is the first thing that my kids have watched all the way through. They haven't seen any of the movies. Um, yeah, so this would be the only real Star Wars thing they've been, you know, uh, exposed to, and they enjoyed it. So, they happily watched through the whole series. I didn't question them on like how much they liked it, but the fact that they sat through it and watched the whole thing and didn't just tune out and go do something else,
Yeah,
uh, says something. So
yeah.
Yeah, it held my kids' attention. I think, we watch it maybe in 3 or 4 sittings, about 2 episodes each. And, when we get to the end of that second episode, it'd be like, can we please watch the next one, Dad? And be like, I like that you're super engaged, but let's take a break. But
You were like, no, go do your Legos.
yeah, it was like, we got other things to do. But yeah, I think The other part is it's I feel like Star Wars has struggled when it hasn't involved like Luke or the Empire. I think the storytelling has been hard for those spin-off series where Andor definitely is like a slow burn, but you can definitely tell that it's catered towards a more adult audience. Mandalorian's probably a little bit more approachable. I
Yep.
didn't see the Acolyte. And then I think Ahsoka is going to be, if you've watched Rebels and if you watch Clone Wars, then it's going to appeal to you more. But whereas Skeleton Crew is like, if you've seen the original trilogy and know how it ends, like, then you probably will at least appreciate these. Or even if you haven't really watched much Star Wars, I think it's still very approachable for any type of audience.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we as like, people entering middle age here are like, oh, back when we were kids, we had all these great kids movies and kids properties, and we're like, oh, if only you had these. I feel like this is that, but maybe people aren't going to expose their kids to this, which would be a shame. I think they should. So I'm all about exposing kids. No, I said that wrong. I said that wrong. Said that wrong. I apologize. I apologize.
Uh,
What's wrong? You okay? Got a headache?
yeah, I'm perfectly fine.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll wait till tomorrow. All right.
Fair enough.
All right, let's chat about
Oh, booze.
performances. Did anybody stand out for you as your performance leader here in this one? I mentioned already for me, one of the people I really enjoyed was Fern in the show. When I saw that girl act, I just assumed she had to be some famous person's kid because it just looked like a kid who like grew up in the industry and like started at a very young age. And so I just looked her up. I don't see that she is. She's 14 now and she began acting at 7, but I thought she had really good facials through the show, and I thought she even had good tonal expressions with her voice and carries herself really well. So I think this is somebody to keep an eye on as she continues through Hollywood, if that's what she's going to do. How about you guys? Who stood out for you?
I liked Fern as well, both for how, how skilled she was at, portraying the role, but also for how she was written. Because she did really portray a character that could just make up a story on the fly and just BS her way through things to try to get what she wanted. And I mean, it's easy to, say, oh, that's the kind of character I'm trying to embody or whatever. And it's another thing to actually make it believable. So she did great. Um, and a bit of an outlier here. I liked KB. Like initially, she seemed like she was just in the background, not a whole lot of lines, not a whole lot to do. But then they work that into her character and like her backstory and like the things she's dealing with. And it's like, oh, that she's actually better written than I thought. And the fact that she did just play second fiddle for so much of it until it was her time to shine, I think that really yeah, that was it's an understated performance, but I think it was a good one. So
I have to say, I mean, the you mentioned that Neil is like comic relief. I feel like every time that they're not on that adventure, the kid is in the bathtub, just hanging out and like living his best life. I'm like, yeah, like you do it. Like you're back home, and then pirates are showing up, and you're watching like just scrubbing your armpits while you look at a ship blasting overhead. Hilarious, like really genius. I too also appreciated though KB the the notion of that she's got a visual impairment and that she's got the visor. If you've seen her as a character, a still of her, she's got a Geordie LaForge type of visor that like even the robots use. Come to find out that's like a cybernetic implant to help with her vision. It's cool. Like, and then the kids are really focused on helping her, and Lim is pretty supportive in that regard. I think they all kind of play off each other, and I go back
Yep.
to my original point is that you know I think if you're a kid and you see those characters and you see how they're defined and complex, like I think you could like, oh, I relate more to Wim or I relate more to Neil.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
good point.
and you're like, okay, like I think that that's fun because then kids can kind of explore like, okay, where would I fit in the Star Wars universe?
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Cody, you mentioned earlier, and Blue just kind of went through some of that too. But yeah, just the fact that each kid had like their own, like kind of distinct segment of what the story was. And so that was really cool. Just yeah, like Wim had his fears and stuff that he struggled through, and KB essentially has a disability who she struggles with.
Yeah.
And then Fern is like trying to be an adult the whole time, and then realizes it's too much. Like the pressure gets to her. She has a breakdown there, and Neil, I think though was my favorite out of all of them. Though it was like basically all the comedy kind of went through him, kind of channeled through him, and I just love how they had like no filter. They just like he did like there's that one scene what was it? The girls were like pretending to be like a security thing or something, and they're like, "Who's your crush at school?" And Wim's like, "Oh, nobody." And Neil just yells out this girl's name.
Yes.
I laughed quite a bit at that. But I didn't dislike any of the characters in the show. I don't think. Like I can't think of a character that I disliked, and that's pretty hard to pull off. I think I also really enjoyed the performance of SM33. I think that was just brilliantly done. It was such a fun character. Like it just kept going back and forth, between his allegiance essentially.
Yeah.
But like always felt like it always felt like it was still a fun character, whether he was technically a good guy or a bad guy in the moment. And I have to assume that that's got to be a reference to Smee, right? That's Mr. Smee, SM33. Yep. There's like no way that's not
that makes sense.
Yeah,
didn't catch that, but that makes sense. Yes. Yeah. That's good.
That was Nick Frost's first foray in Star Wars, right?
So
maybe.
Okay.
I don't know, but I will say, this is another property we've reviewed now where we're like, Star Wars came up with yet another interesting way to make a lovable droid character, like those bastards.
I've always had a soft spot.
And the little creature. In this case, it was like the one on the head that kept popping. They always have the little creature and the droid, and they pull them both off. Always. Yeah. I don't know how.
They combined them into one this time, and it worked.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess like Simon Pegg has been in Star Wars now. He also has been in Star Trek, so he's got that feather in his cap. But maybe Nick Frost will be in the next Star Trek movie.
There it is. Maybe Simon Pegg was the little creature in the eyeball.
Yeah.
Do we know? I don't know. I didn't look it up. I don't know. Who does the squeak for the little... okay. Just a couple last things I had here. One, I wanted to ask you guys, particularly because this is a Star Wars property, what did you think of the visuals in this particular show compared to some of the other things we've seen, not only in Star Wars, but not in Star Wars as well? Particular attention to like what you think was like CGI versus practical in this one, or anything else that may have stood out to you.
There's not enough lens flare. We need more J.J. Abrams lens flare. If that start there.
I think it was pretty solid overall. Like there were a handful of scenes where the CGI looked a tiny bit dodgy. Like I want to say there was like one part of the sequence where they're going through the barrier and whatnot, like towards the end. I want to say there was something that seemed a little off to me. Otherwise, for the budget, which I don't know what it was, but I mean, for like an 8-episode show, I think it looked good.
Yeah.
There were times it sort of felt like Neil's lines were just sort of voiced over, because I mean, you can't really see his mouth move most of the time. I mean, there is a mouth under the trunk, but usually the trunk is covering it. So there were times it just sort of felt like the character's there, but the voice is added after. I still like the character a lot, don't get me wrong, but yeah, that just, it was a little bit of dissonance for me, but that's really the main quibble I can give for the effects.
He doesn't eat through his trunk, Justin.
I think, I mean, visually, it's a pretty impressive development. I liked some of the takes of how they set up the settings. I liked the town. I think, Justin, you were the one that mentioned that things kind of looked Fallout-ish.
Yes.
And I thought the construction of this world, it's like the whole planet that they're on, you're like, this seems kind of like ideal-esque or utopian in like the fact that, the cars are more or less running on rails, or like those fancy racetrack cars that you would zoom around that would have one point of contact to get electricity. I forget the name of them. But that this world seems superficial or constructed in a way that
Yeah.
you're like that there's a secret, or why is this? None of the other worlds that we've seen in Star Wars are built in a way that seems superficial. And so I think, the how that teases itself out is cool and visually appealing. And
Hmm.
then I I think one of my favorite moments in a couple of like when they're jumping through hyperspace with the Onyx Cinder the first few times, and it's basically like just shooting off dirt because it's just been sitting for
Yes.
hundreds or thousands of years, and that this might be around since Old Republic days. Like I think where they really lean in and do a good job of blending the pirate elements of like the skeletons on the ship. And is it a play on words because it's a skeleton crew of like four kids that are trying to work a spaceship together,
Yep.
or that there's dead skeletons because the ship has sat for thousands of years, but it's like farting out dust as it lands. It's falling apart as it lands on planets, and it's super cool. And then, I think the visuals just add to the immersion of it. And I think like the last part of, some of the chases, like the bike scenes in the final episode and the beginning of the
Mm.
episode, like definitely the ET symbolism is there. Um, but overall, I think it was beautifully done for the budget that I had. I liked the visuals. I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah, I can't think of anything right offhand that I thought was, poorly done. I thought everything looked really nice. I thought all the locations were really cool, and nice to see some things that aren't like clay huts or cold steel, because that's like basically all we get in a lot of
Mm.
Star Wars things. Um, homes in the desert that are very rustic or just steel as far as you can see. Um, so these felt like their own unique locations, but it still felt like Star Wars. And overall, yeah, I think everything looked really good.
Yeah, I'd agree. I thought it was a very, very pretty show. I when they actually found skeletons on the ship, I was like, oh crap, like I didn't even consider that for the angle of the name of the show, which is pretty funny. But um then that's when they kind of let us know they're going hard into the pirate theme a little bit more. And I was like, oh, that's cool too, with the dust and the cobwebs and skeletons and everything else was cool too. Yeah, lots of good. It seemed like, and sometimes I'm fooled by this, but it seemed like they tried to use a lot of practical effects on this with the aliens and some of the places they visited, worlds, etc., where maybe the CGI blended a little bit better because they had more quote unquote real stuff on the set than they might have in some of the other things we've seen, even in this universe itself. And I did enjoy his, I forget who just said this, Justin, maybe, that like we start in the suburbs, and my wife was like, there's no suburbs in Star Wars. But it's kind of makes sense. Yeah, we won't, when they get to the end of it, it kind of makes sense a little bit. So give it a shot. Don't go crazy on it just from that opening episode with what you see there. So okay, anything else you guys want to touch on before we get to final thoughts and ratings here?
Um, One thing from me, like I know like a week ago or so when we first started talking about this, I typed in our chat that there was something that just kind of blew my
Oh
mind
yeah.
that it was included. So this it's a deep cut, like I said, but the fact that they put it in there is something that for me particularly meant it didn't mean a lot, but it was a very nice nod. So I'm actually cheating my background here to kind of illustrate just background and
Now I will say when you type that, I didn't know what it was. Now I think I know what it is.
effects. So there is, despite all the ups and downs of Star Wars, there is one thing that George Lucas wishes and like Star Wars in general wishes we would forget. Yet time and again in Star Wars projects, the people behind them don't let us forget. From the mention of Life Day in The Mandalorian to a scene in this, the Star Wars Holiday Special lives on because in the first episode, there's a scene where one of Neil's little brothers is like watching a little holographic display of like a circus act, and that is the same damn circus act, frame for frame, as that the one Lumpy, Chewbacca's son, is watching in the Star Wars Holiday Special. The fact that
Wow.
they included that just immediately endeared me to this.
That's amazing.
Would be a downgrade of television if you had to watch like it on a table,
Yes.
right? It's just a live puppeteer, but it's just holograms on a table.
It's interesting. Yeah.
It's not a big of a spoiler, viewers or listeners. You'd be like, okay.
That's good. Anybody else have anything else we didn't cover before we do a final rating on this?
One thing I would say, I wish we had kind of gotten the rest of the story with Tak Rened. Like I really thought the way that the plot was going to go was we were going to find that like somehow he was, or his family, some generation, like, we don't know how old that story he is, like where in the timeline that falls. But I thought like because the ship was on the planet, like he stayed there and like he was part of the leadership somehow, and that's where the plot was going to go in the end. And they like we never find out what happened to him actually.
Yeah.
And I really wish we had.
Yeah.
I'm really curious.
I also thought the angle too that he might have been a founder of At-Aten, or like discovered it and then like integrated into society.
Yeah, because the ship clearly didn't like. You could think, oh, that the ship crashed and he died in the crash, but the ship was fine. Like it didn't crash and like was broken up. So I'm led to believe that he survived on the planet, just didn't leave. Like he could have left and just didn't.
That is weird. Isn't the ship upside down when they go into it? Am I imagining that?
I'd have to go back and watch the takeoff sequence again to know for
Could
sure.
be right. Yeah,
I thought it was upside down, like they saw seats on the
Yeah.
ceiling or something, but I don't know how or why it would be upside down under the dirt either. But
True.
I don't know. Yeah, they could have explored that a little bit more.
I think the piece to like the Onyx Cinder when it reveals itself, and there's like a breakdown and it basically turns into a different ship more or less. But that there was like the Reddit rabbit hole is crazy, but they're like, hey, that actually looks like this ship from the Old Republic, Star Wars: The Old Republic. I'm like, oh yeah, it is. And so like clearly it's a ship that is from around the era of the Old Republic, and then all these Old Republic credits that are being minted on this planet. Like there's a lot of pieces that are like, man, you could have explored that. And I hope that maybe they do a second season so that we could maybe have a little bit more origin story for the pirate.
As long as we get the owl lady some more.
Yes.
Who has an adorable Funko Pop, just putting it out there. All right. Yeah, but you mentioned even like the planet itself and like the mystery of like what is this planet that they live on. And to be honest, and I don't know if it was the writing in the show or just my expectations or what, but like even the fact that this was a supposed treasure planet, I did not expect it to be a literal treasure planet. I assumed like it was a metaphor for like this haven that they lived in and like that was going to be the treasure and blah blah blah. So when they actually like found money, I was like, damn, I didn't see that coming either. Like, how is this show tricking me? So anyway, all right. Well, let's put some scores on this bad boy tonight. Anybody want to go first with final thoughts and score out of 10?
Can we do a variation, like final score, and then if we wanted to rank where it sits in live action Star Wars series?
Oof, we could try. Is that you volunteering to kick off?
Yeah, I can do it. It's for me, it's a 5 out of 5. I love that it's self-contained. I think there's only one episode that kind of drags for me. It's kind of like the Mirror World episode that seemed like pretty perilous for the kids. And like, okay, that seems a little plot armorish, but I can look past it. I think overall, fantastic series, great for kids, wide audiences, would watch it again. Probably would catch things I didn't see on the first go around. It's up there for me with Ahsoka Andor and Mandalorian for me. Like no particular order. It's in the top five of the series that they made.
It's 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10.
I would say so, yeah. If you do
Wow.
math
Okay.
good.
Okay. Let's make sure it wasn't like a 9 out of 10, but round it up to 5 out of 5. These are important questions to ask. So I can go next. I enjoyed the heck out of the show way more than I thought I was going to. It was pretty solid all the way around. And one of the things, as like I said, somebody who's been around a while now, I thought this show actually, like very few properties have, kind of dripped with 80s feel for nostalgia, even though it was all new stuff, but like it was there. Reminded me of like the first season of Stranger Things when I watched that, and I was like, how the hell did they like pull off this feeling so much like it came out of the 80s? Um, Very few things are able to do that. Like Super 8, I know is one movie. That's Abrams too, isn't it?
I think
Um,
so.
and there's a couple other tiny ones, but it's impressive when they can hit the tone correct on a show like this. The characters were great, scenery was great. The plot had me guessing, which is quite surprising, especially with Jude Law's character. Which, P.S. I don't consider him a very good actor for his career, but I actually thought he was pretty serviceable in this as well. So, at the risk of overplaying it, I thought this was one of his better acting roles he's ever had as well. So, this was pretty fantastic. Now, the hard thing to rate on this is I have a score that I think I would give the show, but I have another score that I think is what it deserves. So I'm going to give it the latter, which is 8.5 out of 10, just because I feel like it was. I was going to do 8 out of 10, but I'm going to give it the 8.5 out of 10 because I feel like it was better than it even should have been. So if that makes any sense. For subverting my expectations of being wildly fantastic, I'm giving it 8.5 out of 10.
Um, since I ended up giving it the same score as Cody, I guess I'll go next. And for the same reason, because I went into this expecting not much, in all honesty, especially after the last few shows we got, where it was sort of very short of expectations. But this one surprised me in the best possible way. Because it did feel like something from the 80s, like a show that respected its audience regardless of age. It didn't really like dumb things down too much just to appeal to kids and to leave adults bored or something like you see with a lot of kid centric entertainment these days. It actually it had a few it felt like a movie from the 80s, like with jokes that you might not get until you're older, like the whole what's a brothel thing, because they end up on a planet where it's just I think that's the pirate planet, and they're
Yeah.
wandering around and they're like, you don't want to go in there, it's a brothel. What's a brothel? Let's go this way, kind of a thing. So little things like that you wouldn't pick up necessarily on as a kid, but it's there for when you watch it again when you're older. And that's a wonderful thing. Um, there were a handful of rough edges, where like there were several times where the ownership, like the captainship of the Onyx Cinder, is in question. And at one point, the kids are just like essentially no take backsies or something like that, and it's just like okay, and suddenly they're in control again. That felt a little meh, but overall, like I'm nitpicking to try to find anything really wrong with this. Um, it was, as I've said earlier in this episode, it was a breath of fresh air. It was it was an injection of life and whimsy and just wonder into the Star Wars universe that it desperately needed. And the fact that it's not being more actively watched is kind of a shame, because this is one of the best Star Wars things that has been put on the table in a pretty long time, in all honesty. 8.5 out of 10. And if I had to rate it in terms of like where it falls in the live action Star Wars shows, I haven't seen all of Mandalorian, so it's either right below that or right above that. So it's either number one or number two. This show was way better than I thought it would be, and a lot better than I hoped it would be. If you're not watching it, you're doing yourself a disservice.
I didn't rank it, sorry. I'd probably put it right behind The Mandalorian, but I think it was better than the rest that I'm thinking of, at least. Definitely better than Andor and the Acolyte and Obi-Wan and Boba Fett. So probably better than Ahsoka, but I'd probably put it right below The Mandalorian. Shout out to that prostitute, by the way. She was great. Helping the kids, trying to stay safe. Stop.
Let me see. I'm going to try and find some things to say that you guys haven't covered yet. Because I agree with a wide amount of what you have said. I felt like as I said, all the characters were really fun. All the kids were fun to watch and not annoying as kids can be in shows, apparent, once from time to time. I really enjoyed that they all had like character arcs, and that were well done. And we also get a character arc. A person went from being a good-ish character to a bad character, which does not happen very often in a lot of shows that I can think of offhand. And it felt really fun all the way through. It was just like you say, that they did hit that vibe that it was kind of like an 80s feel, and it was just really kind of fun to watch all these episodes all the way through. I do think that the finale got a little sloppy. And whether they just had too much to try and fit in or what, I'm not certain, but there were a lot of questions that came up for me just in that specific episode. Like like at the one point, like Wim, like they're like leaving the tower of the
Supervisor.
Supervisor, that's the supervisor
Yep.
tower. And he like yells to Jod, and like everybody in our family, even our kids, recognize, like, why did he do that? They didn't like what point was that? Like, because nothing happened from it, and it didn't seem to make sense in that moment. And like Jod like surrenders when Wim picks up a lightsaber, when he very easily could have taken that away. Like, I don't know why he surrendered at that point. So there's plot points that I felt were a little sloppy in the finale.
That's fair.
But overall, I enjoyed a lot of it. The action and the visuals were really fun, and the characters were great. Locations were great. I really would struggle to find anything in here that I did not like. So I'm going to go with 8.75. And yeah, for me, this is right behind Mandalorian season 3 specifically.
Oh,
I think I probably would put it above seasons 1 and 2 of that, which were the other properties that are at the top of the list for Star Wars for me. It's easily better than everything else that I've seen so far, like not even close. So
right.
So I thought that, honestly, that scene is interesting, the one that you call at the end. I think things seemed to feel like they were jamming 10 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag by the last episode.
Yeah.
I don't know, I thought Wim's last exchange was like a moment of conflict. Like he's drawn to Jude Law's character Jod, and like has been obsessed with the Jedi, and the fact that Jude has a conflicted background is, I don't know. I agree. Like it seemed a lot of place, and then in examination, it seems like, okay, maybe it's just because he's still drawn, has like they went on an adventure together across the galaxy, and yet he came back, and there's, I think there's a lot to explore there. But I agree.
Yeah, I took it as like Wim wanting to like save him in the end.
Yeah, I saw elements of that too.
But also there was like no reaction from Jod. And
Jod was just standing there, like
he's just like,
yeah.
But
whatever.
the goal.
Oh, that was Jude Law acting.
Yeah.
That was his range. All right. Well, average score tonight of 8.94, rounded up. So we'd like to award the 2025 Fondy to Skeleton Crew here on January 20th. Congratulations. That's a pretty good score out of the gate.
It's all downhill from here.
Go watch it.
All downhill from here, folks.
That's right. So, all right, I'm going to leave you guys today with a return of a game which we haven't played in a long time. Here's my rules to the game. It is short. You are allowed only 2 words to respond to this prompt I'm about to give you. 2 words only. Touching on this TV show we just covered tonight, Skeleton Crew, there were a lot of comparisons to another beloved 80s property, The Goonies. And sometime in the last week or so here, they have officially greenlit The Goonies Part 2 and Gremlins Part 3. So, in 2 words only, I'd like to hear your response for what range of excitement you have for Goonies 2 and Gremlins 3. While our hosts make up their mind, we'll tell our listeners that we are coming up here next with some annual most anticipated lists. We have most anticipated movies and video games coming your way. We'll see how many of my top 10 I can not get to again here in 2025. Something I'm good at is not getting even half of the things on my list, but, hopefully this is the year. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. All right, if anybody has their 2-word response to the announcement of Goonies 2 and Gremlins 3 this evening, what is your response to that?
Lukewarm excitement.
Lukewarm excitement. I thought that was a Star Wars pun at first. Okay. Lukewarm excitement. Okay, Justin had his hand up.
Please no.
Please no. Okay. Brett.
Well,
That's 2 words. Thank you much. I'm just kidding.
The 2-word limit is really that really is handcuffed because I can't use "Hey, you guys." I can't use $50 bill. So I'm gonna have to go with Rocky Road.
Interesting. Rocky Road. Wow, we'll see. I guess mine, let's see, I didn't think of mine. 2 words. I would say,
Garbage day.
oh man, I've wanted a Goonies 2 forever, but I don't know what it's going to be about. If it's going to be the same or different, same people, different people. I don't know. But Gremlins, I'm not as big of a fan of that. But so I guess I will say, let's see? Question mark. Hopefully it's good. But even if it even gets done, we'll see. They've talked about Goonies 2 for 30 years, so we'll see. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap us up here at Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This has been Cody, that's been Brett, that's been Blue, that's been Justin, and that's been Lumpy in the background back there. Oh, goodness. Have a fantastic one, everybody. Stay warm out there. It's chilly. Take care.
See you next time.
Bye.